As we just introduced, I'm Andrew Bojie with All Product Design, and this is Larry Robertson with AON Invent. And as way of introduction, let me first explain why we've got two companies here and how they evolved from one. All Product Design started off as a product design company for helping CPGs develop new products. And in amongst this time, we worked with a lot of inventors, a lot of creative people that were also looking for our services. But as we would continue with working with those inventors, we discovered that there was a gap between getting that innovation from a prototype stage or an engineered position and getting that then to the market. We needed to bring the CPGs into the whole shooting match as well. And that was where I partnered with Larry Robertson, and we developed AON Invent, which now really takes care of all the intellectual properties. So if you want to elaborate on that.
Okay, sorry about that. On the AON Invent side, and both of our businesses work on really two ends of the food chain, so to speak. As Andrew said, we've been working with the CPGs for a number of years, helping them design and improve existing products, innovate new ones. But we also realized that to feed that, we needed a constant influx of new ideas. And that goes to the individuals, the private individuals throughout North America, now actually the world. And how do we help them to do that? And what we do is really generic, so let's just talk about it in generics. And the first step that we get involved in is helping individuals vet ideas. Several of the presenters today made mention of the fact that while it's nice to hear our friends and family encourage us, their feedback is of little value, unfortunately. They're the same people that told every one of us we should write a book, have our own television show, and be on America's Got Talent. So keep that in mind when you're vetting your ideas about your product. So the first piece, the first step, do you have a product? Also, a couple of presenters today mentioned the importance of realizing that the world is not looking for good products. Andrew, we've seen that hundreds of times.
That's right. And
go ahead.
All right. So let's move on to this. Okay. So absolutely, good items are tough to get to market. We're looking for the best item it can be because, as was pointed out a little earlier, it takes an item. You've got to get an item on the shelf. You've got to kill another item. So.
That's exactly right. So the item, especially if it's a new item from a new company, it has to be substantially better than everything out there because that merchant is going to have to make a decision of killing something that's proven from a company that's already demonstrated that they can fulfill, they can ship, they can meet these deadlines. And if we're asking them to take a chance with a lot of unknown quantity, it's really that merchant, that buyer with that chain store that's taking a huge risk. Right. And Andrew?
All right. Well, let's consider the liability now then. Now, when you go and taking a product to market, you've got a lot of investment, as I'm sure you've started to realize. It's not just on the design side, which is where we come into things, but you've got your tooling to consider, if you're going to be taking this to market yourself, distribution, all these different things. And something that I always get concerned about when I've been working with inventors is the amount of money and the amount of trust that they put into their product. All that investment, all that money they're pulling together, which can be wiped away in an instant, should a product in an area that they weren't even thinking about just sideswipe them out of the market, and all that investment is gone. So there's a tremendous liability if you're laying it all on the line as well. So it's another big thing to consider. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Right, and from a liability standpoint, we're talking not only the product liability from the use, but then a liability from the manufacturer's standpoint if it in fact infringes on an existing product. I can tell you I had a client a number of years ago that had a product that they brought to us, wanted some help with, and I voiced an opinion early on that this item should not move forward because it's going to infringe on this other product, and this other company has untold millions to destroy you. And as it turned out, that's exactly what happened. So we feel that the vetting process is critically important. Sometimes, Andrew, we talk about this a lot. We think that the best service that we provide oftentimes is telling someone, kill this item before you move forward. Yeah. Take your creative juices, your resources, keep it going. Let's talk about what you've learned, but learn how to channel that creative talent and solve a problem that is worth solving. We just had a client, actually here in Northwest Arkansas, had spent a tremendous amount of money, even produced an infomercial before going through some of these steps. And we looked at it in our evaluation team, and everyone came to the same conclusion. You have 10 pounds of solution for a 1 pound problem that probably wasn't worth solving. And unfortunately, that was a $250,000 mistake.
Yeah, yeah. So moving on. The next thing is considering on the patent side, making sure before you jump into that there isn't something that you're going to be infringing on, that there isn't something already that's protected out there. It seems like an obvious step, but you'd be very surprised at how many items that come in here into us with people ready to throw down a lot of money to get developed and work through, already have patents, or even worse, are already on for sale on Amazon.com. So making sure that you're covered in all those areas is of paramount importance.
One of the easiest ways, if you think you have a new idea, it's a simple little technique, and most of you probably already know this. Just Google the item, but go to Google Images. You can scan up several hundred different products in about 60 seconds. And if you can put a description in Google Images and find a photograph of this thing that came to you this morning in the shower, chances are it's already on the market. And while that sounds almost comical, I'm going to say that 1 out of 4 submissions that come to us, people have already spent, in many cases, thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. And 10 minutes into it, we find that someone in Redmond, Washington launched that item on eBay 3 years ago. And it's now public domain and cannot be protected.
Yeah, absolutely. So what then, assuming that you're feeling good, that your product is hitting all the high points and you're going to move ahead, you're going to want to find yourself somebody to help develop your product. We work with a lot of CPG companies here locally, as well as inventors, and that. But we want to talk about what you're going to want to look for in a quality partner to develop your products there. First of all, you've got an idea, you've got a product, it's good. But remember we said you're not looking for a good product, you're looking for a great product. So the first thing that I would lean on your creative group to be coming up with, these your engineers and so on, is the ability to have a good ideation session. Put together a think tank, and it won't be just their expertise, it'll be expertise of other people within the category that you're going into, and pulling together, making this product as good as it can possibly be, all the different features and aspects of it. You'd be surprised, you could be looking at an item that you consider a very, very tired category, you'd be surprised how many new innovations we can pull out and put together in a situation like that. So if you've got a great idea and that's good, how much better can it be? And the better it can be, the better situation you're going to be on the shelf.
I love something Sean Womack said in an earlier session about the 3 pizza. We do the same thing. We're using the Subway sandwich version of that exact same business model. And last year put 41 new items on the shelves, actually they're in production, that came out of those ideation sessions last year. So that's a very inexpensive way to develop a product. The other thing, as Sean also mentioned, go out and peruse these stores. Look for the people that look like they've been wandering around in that building for a long time, maybe with a tattered smock, that just seem to be the individual that may have a voice that no one's ever tapped into. And they're anxious to share their opinions, and they can't believe someone's actually asking them their thoughts. And some incredible ideas have come from those simple techniques.
Yeah. Okay. Next, We're going to go back to patents, the very important area. But if you're going to come up with new innovations, new features, and those sorts of things, again, you're going to want to look at the patent side again. What's protectable? What could you be infringing and ending up in an area of liability again? So you've got to keep your eye on that. And but the more protection you can get, the better situation you want to be in the long run. Of course, a patent's as good as you're going to, it could be, as long as you're going to protect it. And that can be a tough thing as well, when you could potentially end up against a giant there that's going to throw a lot of money into something, and are you even able to protect it? So that's something to consider as well. It's a cost that you may have to face at some point.
Andrew, when we talk about patents, and there's a general misconception in the conversation of patents. We all assume that, of course we realize there's a step of applying for the patent, and there's normally a sort of a quasi-adversarial relationship that develops with the patent office and the examiners. And in a period of 2 or 3 years, if everything goes right, you are awarded a patent. But the reality is, no matter how strong that patent is, it's only as strong as the bankroll that's willing to defend it. And that's the reason that I would encourage, some of you, you may want to join forces, go from the single item to a brand, to maybe possibly license your item to a company that already owns that space. Because it's much, much easier to walk in as a tried and true supplier of any retailer and say, hey, I've got this new item I want to show you, than it is to say, hey, I've got a new company, a new item. That's a challenge, and it can be done. There's no question about it. But you may want to also consider teaming up with people that already own that space.
Yep. Okay. Next step for your design group, they're going to want to concept the idea. So you've got an idea, we know what features it's going to be. Now what's it going to look like? How are all those different functionalities going to affect this? And this is really where we drill down. What's the product going to look like? How is it going to feel? What are the aesthetics? Is it an organic, ergonomic shape? How is it going to function? All those things are going to come in until we can drill down to exactly what that piece is going to look like. This is the pre-engineering phase, but at this point, it's very fluid, it's very fast, and it's very cost-effective compared to when you step into the engineering phase.
I'm glad that we have this shot here of a barbecue grill project from just a few years ago. We talked about logistics and the importance of logistics. In many cases, depending upon where your product is made, logistics component might often be 40% of the total landed cost of your product. We had a project a couple of years ago that Andrew's engineering team was able to increase the shipping cube, the efficiencies in the shipping cube, to go from 330 to 1,917 barbecue grills in a sea container. Now that lowered the cost of that item to that supplier by more than 50% because of the distribution efficiencies. These are some of the things that you want to think about, and oftentimes when we're launching a new product, a new company, we may focus on, hey, I've got this great idea for a widget, I can build this widget for X number of dollars, I think I can sell it for this. And that's about 10% of the equation. So those are reach out. There's companies around the globe that can do this sort of thing in addition to our firm, and it's really an important and an awesome opportunity.
Yeah. So your next step then is going to be the actual engineering of the component. Here you're going to be in a situation where engineering these days, it's generally not pieces of paper with dimensions on it. It's a 3D model. It's a piece. It looks a lot more like Toy Story on the screen than it does what it used to look back in the 70s and the 80s. So when you're looking at something on the screen, it's a finished item. You can spin that around. It's fully dimensional. Fully to scale, and that is the actual file that ultimately will be manufactured. That file in itself will be sent to the factory to do all the production work on. Now, something else to consider when you select somebody that's going to do the engineering for you. Just because somebody can draw something on a computer, and there's a lot of inexpensive programs to do that, and there's a lot of very, very expensive programs to be used. But But anybody can draw something on a screen, but you want to make sure that they've got experience in all the different facets of the actual production. It's very easy to end up in a situation where you get something that looks really nice on the screen. That's exactly what it want it to look like, and then either it can't be made or it can't be made cost effectively. So you're going to want somebody that's considering all of those different aspects of to keep this thing as efficient as it possibly can be.
Andrew, just for a moment, let's just talk about like draft of a mold for just one little example of things that some of the folks may not be familiar with.
If you're going to be making plastics, say an injection molded piece, for instance, it's of paramount importance that piece will come out of the mold once it's been molded. It's like building when you used to build a sandcastle as a kid, okay? The sandcastle comes out of the bucket because of all the shapes and the considerations that have been in there. It's those sorts of things have got to be considered when building that mold. In the same way, you can't have undercuts, you can't or anything like that. Otherwise, it's not going to come on the mold. So you want somebody that's experienced on that. And other things, right? Position of holes, how close you can be to certain areas. They've got to be considering about how the plastic is going to be able to flow through that mold, and those sorts of things. There's a lot of considerations, so it's a lot more than building a pretty picture on the screen that you think looks nice to get a good product on the shelf. Going to work. Okay, and then material selection goes hand in hand with that, of course. There's a lot of different materials that you can use, and depending on the use, if it's plastics, then is it an ABS, is it polypropylene? If you're also thinking, is it going to be in contact? Children, lots of considerations for material. Now, another consideration that you might not be thinking of with material, though, if you can create something with just one material, then you may simplify the whole system with sourcing that, because when you've got a factory that are making the plastic parts, one that's making the metal components, and another maybe there's a wood insert, or who knows what it's got, then all of a sudden you've got different factories. If you're trying to coordinate that in Asia or wherever that may be an incredible difficulty. So economy of the materials and those things is going to be of paramount importance to you.
Oftentimes you can save money by spending a little more, possibly on the front end in some of these areas, because in some cases those factories may be hundreds of miles apart. So then there's this additional complexity to the logistics piece.
I've got one piece that I'm doing at the moment where we're increasing the thickness, increasing the material. But what that does, it lowers the pressure on the injection molder that you can use. So it means that the factory can run that more efficiently, even though you're putting more plastic in it. So there's a lot more to it than just the simple seeing what you like. Now, we talked a little bit about this, but on manufacturing efficiency, knowing how the factory is going to run with the different production methods that are going to be on there, that's another big important factor. And for that point, the more the engineer knows about your factory, their setup, their machinery, those sorts of things are going to help them make those good decisions. If you're dealing with very often you can look at the products that a factory is already putting out. You get a very good idea where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, and so then the engineer is able to design around that. But the more information the engineer has, the better off they're going to be. And that's, for instance, why we like to work very closely with the factory, have a relationship with the factories that ultimately this is going to be manufactured in, just to so that we can design as effectively as possible.
And even though we don't actually manufacture anything, we don't participate in the manufacturing process, we don't sell or broker the goods that we design, we are involved from the standpoint that we know that if we can help a client find a factory that we can trust and work with, that sort of thing, that ultimately we're going to all be more successful in the process.
Okay, FEA simulation, finite element analysis, and the like. This is where, now that model that we created, we can start testing that. So we can start to make sure that it's going to have the strength that it needs. Maybe fatigue's going to be a problem. So what's it going to? We know we've got the strength that we need for one flex of it. But what's going to happen when it gets flexed 10,000 times? How is that going to work with work hardening of the material, or whatever that would be? So FEA simulation is a really good way before you get to mold, before you get to the point of spending a lot of money down the road. You can get a very good idea exactly how the product is going to function right there around essentially real-world circumstances.
We recently found a product on the shelf with well, it was on the shelf, frankly, at Walmart, and looked at it, and we just intuitively realized there's a lot of raw material being wasted here. And we contacted that manufacturer, and was it 47? It was almost 50%, just shy of 50% of the raw material we were able to extract without damaging the durability of that product at all.
Yeah, exactly. What I wasn't mentioning, you're right, optimization, because when you do FEA simulation, you can find out where your strengths are. You can put the material just where you need it, take it out of other places with other mold considerations or whatever they would be. So it's a very important step to developing a good product. Okay. Sustainability as well doesn't get all that as much attention on, believe it or not, as I think that it should. But once we've got that product developed, we can get a very good idea of what the carbon footprint is of that product. Especially good to give you a competitive advantage when you compare it to maybe the competitor's sample when you're trying to get into see the buyer. It's a good information sheet to be able to show them. So as sustainability is still a hot topic, it's another good area of attack for you that maybe your competition is not thinking about, and gives you a good expertise, good position to be a +1 on their book. Prototyping will be the next stage. Now that we believe that we've got the product where we need to, we've got to go and prototype that, 3D print it, machine it, whatever those parts would be. And here's, we know the theory is good. We know it all looks good on screen and everything's good. Now we want to get it in hand, test the form, fit, function, make sure it's functioning just the way that we would. And the ergonomics at that point we might do. We may have already addressed the ergonomics by doing a study and then 3D scanning back into the system to work on that. But very often, you only really know how something's going to feel once you get it in your hand and you start to try the functionality. No, that handle feels too big. This is going to be for a female user. We need something that just feels more comfortable, whatever it would be. So this is the time that you really start to pull all those pieces together. And then finally, you're going to want your engineering group to also be able to work on that patent side. Now, in an ideal world, you're using a company that can really get their arms around everything. So they've been involved with the patent searches in the beginning, and now as they're pulling this together, they understand the features that need to be protected, and they're going to be pulling all those drawings together and all those areas and working with the patent attorney to make sure that you get the best coverage that you can going forward and the best protection so that you can get the longevity of your item going to the shelf. And the final step, really, is getting those drawings. Now, remember, I said normally they're not a drawing, it's actually a model, but getting that to the factory. Now, you're probably still going to have some communication issues. You're going to want a company that is still going to remain involved at that point. The factory, they can reach out to them and get questions answered. Any engineering company is only going to get things about 90% of the way ready. There's always going to be tweaks at the factory around their own idiosyncrasies and the way that they like them. There's always tweaks at the mold to get things exactly the way that you want them. And to have a good communication with the engineering company and an openness in that respect is incredibly important. And that goes hand in hand. Troubleshooting, should there be any issues, you want to know that the engineering company is there for you every step and is guaranteeing the work that they have done in that respect. So, we thank you for listening to this. Now we'd like to open things up. We've got a few minutes left. If there's any questions that...
I'd like to share one snippet.
Oh, okay, yeah, feel free.
When we launched our invention service business, now we're in our third year, AON Invent, we anticipated that 99% of our business and our time would be working with individual inventors. And we found that really that model has shifted, and the CPGs now call and say, hey, we know what you can do. Let's find us an item that will do this. Develop something that will do that. And the push has become a pull. And one of the biggest challenges is once in a while we run across something that's not just an item, it is truly disruptive. We've had 2 of them in the past year.
Yeah.
And I want to show you an example of what we call disruptive. This is a bicycle frame, okay? Not all that impressive, possibly, except you can see through it. But if I told you this bicycle frame weighs 1.2 pounds, and will support the weight of a 6,000-pound SUV. That changes the whole dynamic. NASA tested the material and said this stuff is 12 times stronger than steel. And yet it is so disruptive that launching a product like that for the client becomes very, very complicated because it dips into and has applications around the world. And sometimes we found, and this, we just shake our head when this happens, sometimes an opportunity becomes so large that it's almost mind-boggling. And especially if it's anything outside of, you know, the electronics and that sort of thing. But questions on anything or maybe something we didn't talk on? Yes. Susie, to your point on this material, this isotrust carbon fiber lattice material that's protected 73 patents around the world, has the ability, and they've already been prototyped, a replacement for the typical 40-foot tall telephone pole / utility pole, which weighs 2,000 pounds and leaches creosote into the watershed. They can build one, build one. We actually have a prototype of one that weighs 40 pounds. And it will take a direct hit with an EF5 Joplin, Missouri type tornado.
And no leaching.
And no leaching. So there's sometimes the only reason that regulatory issues haven't killed a particular item is because there's not a viable alternative. But these things are constantly, it's a very dynamic process. It's ongoing all the time.
I don't believe I've ever had a situation where where that would actually be the case because of the stages that we're going with prototyping. Now, the only exception I would give you, there was one client that we were working with, and they got into such a trust factor with us, and we didn't even know this was going on, but they were skipping every step. There was no prototyping stage, even though they used to, but they were like, everything's great, and they would just throw everything through. So we would develop something in a week. A week after we developed it, they were machining tooling without any other testing, anything going on, and that's the only time that I've seen a slip-up happen.